Apple, through its revolutionary technological designs, has changed our way of life, from the way we listen to music and the way we interact with computers. Apple has thus become the most valuable company in the history of the world because of market capitalization on the aforementioned revolutionary ideas. Apple Computers was founded April 1st, 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They founded one of the most successful companies in the world, despite the fact they were college dropouts. Jobs and Wozniak's partnership originated years before the founding of Apple. Their partnership started when Wozniak, a self-taught engineer in electronics, would build electronic boxes which he could use to make free long-distance phone calls. In 1976, Wozniak was working on another of these boxes, the Apple I computer. It was without a keyboard or any power supply. The pair, Jobs and Wozniak, sold some of their most valuable possessions, which were a van and 2 scientific calculators, raising about $1,300. They used this money to start a company. Eventually, they sold around 200 computers to local enthusiasts in the San Francisco Bay Area for around $666.66 each. Later that year, Wozniak began his work on the Apple II. It was designed with the idea of appealing to a greater market other than computer enthusiasts. To pursue his dream, Jobs consulted with Mike Markkula, a retired electronics engineer who had managed marketing for Intel Corporation and similar companies. As chairman, Markkula bought 1/3 of the company for $250,000 and hired Mike Scott as president in 1977. To form a better advertising strategy for the Apple computers, Jobs recruited the owner of one of the most successful advertising firms in Silicon Valley, Regis McKenna. McKenna designed the Apple logo and started advertising personal computers in consumer magazines. By June 1977, annual sales reached about $1 million after the Apple II was in retail stores. Meanwhile, Apple was working on the Apple II's successor, which was intended to feature extended memory and graphics capabilities. The Apple III was well received when it was released in September 1980, and it was predicted it would achieve its intended goal of breaking into the office market currently dominated by IBM. However, many of the Apple III units proved to be defective. Production was halted and the defects were fixed. But the Apple III never sold as well as the Apple II and was discontinued by 1984. Despite the setbacks of the Apple III, the company continued on, tripling its 1981 research and development budget to $21 million, releasing 40 new software programs, even its first hard disk. By December 1982, Apple had become the first personal computer company to reach $1 billion in annual sales. To compete with IBM in the business market, Apple released the Lisa computer. The Lisa computer introduced the mouse, and it displayed pictures on the computer screen, substituting for keyboard commands. These innovations came out of Jobs' determination for designing an unintimidating computer anyone can use. Unfortunately, the Lisa did not sell as well as Apple had hoped. Apple was having difficulty designing the elaborate software to link together a network of Lisas and was finding it hard to break IBM's stranglehold on the business market. Mike Markkula stepped down as president in 1983, and Jobs brought in John Sculley, formerly the president of Pepsi-Cola, as the new president of Apple. Jobs felt the company needed Sculley's marketing expertise. On December 12, 1980, Apple introduced its stock to the public. Its offering of 4.6 million shares at $22 each completely sold out in minutes. A second offering at 2.6 million shares sold out also very quickly in May 1981.
On January 24, 1984, Apple announced to its board of directors into the world the Macintosh computer. The small computer was an engaging change from the large Lisa with its 12-inch screen. Just as the Lisa itself had been a huge change from the Apple II series and the growing family of MS-DOS computers on the market, the computer market before the Macintosh was lacking creativity. The majority of the computer companies were claiming their computers could hold more data than everyone else's.
A first look at the screenshot of MacWrite looked very familiar. First, there's the menu bar, which included Apple, File, Edit, Search, Format, Font, and Style, along with pull-down menus. The 8 MHz 68,000 processor was 60% faster than the 5 MHz one, which was found in the Lisa. So the Mac was pretty fast in its days. Memory prices were a limiting factor, which is the main reason the original Macintosh shipped with 128 kilobytes instead of 256 kilobytes. This probably shaved $200 to $400 from the retail price.
In April 1985, Steve Jobs was removed from his position as Apple Vice President and General Manager of the Mac department after many heated issues with then CEO John Sculley. They had many disagreements about the decline in Mac sales. In April 1985, Scully went to the Apple board of directors and told them to remove Steve Jobs from his position. Steve Jobs then went to the board and tried to convince them to remove Scully as CEO. The board eventually sided with Scully as he threatened to quit. In 1986, Steve Jobs purchased Pixar from George Lucas for $10 million. He originally used it to create television commercials. The first major production they had with Walt Disney was Toy Story. The Macintosh Portable was released in 1989. It was Apple's first battery-operated portable computer. It failed because the 16-pound computer could not turn on if the battery wasn't fully charged, and the screen's poor readability in low-light situations. The Macintosh Performa was a series of cheap Macs that then Apple CEO Michael Spindler decided to sell starting in 1992. They were flimsy, prone to failure, and underpowered. They were still more expensive than a PC. Apple, rather than expand the market, destroyed the market for more expensive Macs for a long time. The Message Pad was a series of PDAs developed by Apple in 1993. The device featured handwriting recognition. The failures with the device was that the handwriting recognition was highly inaccurate. They were discontinued in 1998. The gumdrop-shaped iMac was released on August 15, 1998, just before PC Make's digital archives took shape. Its cheery pastel colors had a dramatic influence on PC design. It also used a 233 MHz IBM PowerPC in the base model. A slot-loading model followed soon after.
Players were either big and clumsy or small and useless, with equally terrible user interfaces. On October 23, 2001, after seeing an opportunity, Apple announced the release of their first portable music player, calling it the iPod. At first, the iPod alienated consumers and made them spiteful. Critics attacked the $400 cost, the unconventional scroll wheel, and the lack of Windows compatibility. Despite all the negative feedback, the iPod managed to sell beyond everyone's expectations, even reshaping the entire music industry, and the rest is history. A month later, the iPod was released in Europe to a very excited reception. As more units sold, the entire computer world began to form around the device. As new accessories and software products were released, the finished iPod used 5 GB Toshiba hard drives that were the size of a quarter, ARM CPU, a large high-resolution display screen, and the most recognizable feature of the scroll wheel. Unlike most other digital media players, the iPod used controls similar to MP3s. Instead of controls like Mint in 1979, instead of using skip buttons, a user could spin a wheel on the front of the device to scroll through a list of songs to find the song the user wanted to play. The same wheel was also used to control the menus of the system. As a result, it was much easier to navigate through the iPod's playlist than the comparable Nomad or compact MP3 players. The most popular iPod feature was the ability to sync an iPod's playlist with a Windows PC. Apple took notice of this and made the July 2002 version of the iPod. Now with as much as 20 GB of storage space and Windows PC compatibility, the Music Match. Apple also included PIM software on the iPod. The original spinning scroll wheel was replaced by a solid-state scroll wheel similar to a notebook's touchpad. It continues to be surrounded by a ring of buttons just like the 1 GB iPod.
In January 2008, Apple announced the release of the MacBook Air. It was the thinnest Apple laptop to date. It was slower than most laptops, but had a full-size keyboard and screen and had an oversized trackpad. Apple released a new MacBook Pro in October 2008. It had an all-new case design, which was the first in 5 years. The unibody case was carved out of a single block of aluminum, which made it both strong and thin. It also featured a glass-covered screen and a new glass-covered and clickable trackpad, which introduced Apple's multi-touch technology that allowed up to 4 finger gestures. At the same time, Apple announced the release of the next MacBook, which had the same features as the MacBook Pro, but was the first to have a backlit keyboard.
Later, Apple developed a contract with AT&T to create their first touchscreen device. In January 2007, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone during the Macworld Expo. It was the same size as the iPod, but was unlike any other smartphone. Unlike other smartphones, there was no buttons for dialing numbers. There was only one button, the home button, and everything else was controlled by the new touchscreen. Recently, the first iPad was introduced to the U.S. market in April 2010. In just over a few months, the iPad reached $51 billion in sales, the fastest ever for a consumer device. Apple claimed that it would be the first device in an extremely new market segment.
After being started by 2 college dropouts, Apple Computers has risen from its humble beginnings to become the most valuable company in the world. through market capitalization on revolutionary ideas such as the Macintosh computer and the iPad.